This is a very important event, as it was already mentioned this morning, and clearly Cannes is a city that understands influence, how stories travel, how reputation is formed, how perception shift. And this is not incidental to our topic today, as we are talking about the need to reimagine the transatlantic technology diplomacy in a moment that we all see how artificial intelligence is in our everyday life, influencing how we live, how we work, and how we think. And we just came out of a closed-door session with many experts here in the room, and where we were discussing about the need to, let's say, regain sovereignty of the mind, of the human mind. This will be announced later today and discussed as the Cannes Declaration on the Sovereignty of Mind, and tomorrow in a session here in the Ada Lovelace room, we will also further discuss here with some very influential, and very happy to have them here, some influential voices across Europe and the world. So I won't introduce all of them now. We will have two parts. First, we will have the introductory opening sessions by Francesca Rossi and Brando Benifei, that is coming, is just landing from Strasbourg, is one member of the European Parliament. We will introduce him properly later. But before, let me call Erika and give her the floor to set the stage with some introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Gianluca, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's first of all wonderful to be here in Cannes. I arrived from Brussels yesterday, and it's been raining and cold for 10 days, so it's fantastic to get some fresh air. And this is also what we're hoping to have here today, some fresh ideas and new perspectives. As Reimagine Europa, we've always been a strong supporters of IFDaD and these discussions, because we're a Brussels-based think tank, and we were founded based on the recognition that with the arrival of digital technologies, the world drastically changed. If you see this as the third big communication revolution in history, the first one was writing, and that took 2,000 years to tame, and everything changed during that period. The second one was the printing press, which at a European level at least took around 300 years, and we went from feudal kingdoms to modern nation states with a lot of hiccups and things like that. Now we're in the middle of a digital revolution, and we haven't really dealt with it very well yet, and it would be naive to think that things will not change very profoundly for our societies. And on top of that, we're now getting into an AI revolution. And for me, this is so interesting because it's more than who's going to create the next Google or what's the next big company going to be. This is the most sophisticated information distribution system humanity has ever created. What will that do to power? Who's going to keep it? Who's going to share it? And the decisions that we're going to make in the next 10 years are going to define whether this helps us and in what ways, or whether it creates the opposite. We have seen some of the bad decisions we took with the digital, so I say this is our chance for a redo. Let's learn from the mistakes of the digital and develop something new. And this is why I find this session so particularly interesting, because it really talks about the importance of the sovereignty of the human mind. And I'm fascinated and really happy that we have our keynote speaker. I'm going to introduce him later. But to give us a bit of perspective of why this is so important. So I'm personally fascinated by this. We work with narrative scientists and neuroscientists, some psychologists, etc., to really understand. And one of the things that I found most fascinating was that if I would ask you how long would it take me to change your mind on anything, say vaccines or climate change or anything that you care a lot about, you would probably tell me, Erica, that's very cute of you, but I've made my mind, I've done my research, I know what I think, nothing will make me change your mind. The reality is it takes 6 to 12 months. If you're surrounded by people with a different opinion, you will slowly start moving your opinion, and your brain will justify why you do that. We are much more vulnerable than we think. Our minds thinking is a biological process. So this is a very important issue to raise and to discuss, because in a world with AI, whether it's chatbots or everything, there are two important things here. Who controls the algorithm and what data is it trained on? Because we are going to become that data that we see. So this is enough from me. You're not here to listen to me, but to the wonderful panelists. So I'm going to give back to Gianluca, and I promise that's all you're going to hear from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Enrica. Please take your seat. And actually, it's a pleasure, and thanks to Francesca Rossi to have her here with us. She's many things, but here is also the president of the honorary committee of the World AI Cannes Festival. So she has many activities, and she will have to leave, in fact, at a certain point, but we are very, very honored that she managed to stay with us to open this important forum, and also tomorrow when we will launch the Cannes Declaration that we have drafted and will be finalized by tomorrow. So, Francesca, please, the floor is yours.
So, as Gianluca said, it's really a pleasure to be here again after 1 year to continue the discussion about AI and democracy. Of course, in the meantime, AI has evolved a lot and has been deployed much more in, as you said, in everywhere in our life, into our work, our institutions, and also in the places where we need to reflect and make decisions. So I just want to reflect on a personal thing, that one day, I found myself, I work usually with AI systems, but I found myself asking an AI system to help me think through a complex issue. I had to think about, reflect about an issue, to write something about it. So I didn't ask the AI system to retrieve facts, but simply to talk through this topic, to organize my thoughts, and so to see different perspectives, different angles, and then I remember that I was thinking two things. First, that it was very, very helpful for me, but then that also it was something very new that I had not experienced, until recently. So I was actually having a form of dialogue where I knew that the other side did not have any experience of real world, does not have any responsibility or accountability for what it says, so does not have stakes in the outcome of the dialogue, and also that is optimized according to objectives that I don't know. So because it depends on who trains, the data that is trained, the various phases in the training and the tuning of the system. So I was not really concerned, but I was aware that it was something new. And so this moment and other moments of interaction with the AI system that I have, every day, clarified for me that we are not just building tools that are helpful for us, but we are building systems that can increasingly shape our human judgment. And so that's why, the conversation of AI and democracy that we are having today and we had, over the years is really very important. And so because usually, I work in a company, I work at IBM, and so I always talk about AI in terms of productivity, innovation, competitiveness, and of course these are very important conversation, and to have a responsible AI approach in that space is very important. But today we are really talking about something fundamentally different, I think, where really AI can influence our democracy, because it's used not just in these enterprise environments, but also in the environments of our everyday life, where we form our human judgment. In the past, we had a lot of tools that were helping us, like tools that extended our physical capabilities. Then we had the digital technologies, like search on the web, that extended our access to information. And then today, with this conversational and generative AI, we have a system that interact with us in our own language, continuously, always available, at scale. Everybody can connect with them, and increasingly in a very personalized and also emotional way, that raise emotion in us. And so this means that the role of technology changes. As I said, it's not just a tool that we use, but really a collaborator and a participant with us in shaping our decisions. Now, the problem is not, some people say, oh, because AI has goals, AI has intentions. So AI does not have intentions, but these systems are embedded and used within economic models, incentive structures. So they really are embedded into everything we do, and where especially we need to think. So they are designed and deployed in environments where influence is important and thought and reflection is important. And the question is not really whether they have intention, but the question is who designed this system, for what purpose, with which goals and objectives, which behavior in a collaborative environment they are designed to optimize. Is it engagement? Is it something else? So then when we have a small number of actors that make this decision, that can answer this question, then there may be problems, because we are not just talking about neutral technology, but we're talking about technology that can shape our thoughts and and therefore influence the democracy. So in my work on responsible AI, often I summarize the main principle of a responsible AI approach in a very crisp and simple way, that AI should augment human agency, not decrease it. But human agency is not just human in the loop or human giving, clicking a button and says, okay, what the AI said is fine. So agency means really the ability to understand, to question, to reject, and to decide without any pressure, nudging, especially where this pressure is not really perceived as pressure, and without any emotional dependency. And the personalization is not a problem. Personalization is a good thing in principle, and even assistance, what the AI system can give us, is not really the problem, because, but the problem is persuasion, whether there is the possibility of persuasion. And here, the issue is not that persuasion is not new. Society has used as many tools in the past also to try to persuade people to do things, commercials, many others. But here is really the possibility of persuasion at scale, and in a personalized and optimized way, and also in a kind of opaque way. It's not clear that there is a commercial that wants to persuade her to buy something, but it's maybe hidden into the way we dialogue with an AI system as we would do with another human being. So there is this possibility of a kind of intimacy, conversational intimacy with something that may write like a person, but is not a person, and is designed in a certain way by a certain entity. So that's why I think it's so important, the governance of this AI system. And the governance should not be understood as something that stops innovation, but rather something that helps innovation to be better. So governance is not driving in a different direction and intention with the technological progress. It's really what makes this progress more robust, more sustainable, and also more acceptable by society. In the past, it's not that these safety or governance approaches are new. They maybe are new or relatively new for AI, but we have seen that in other technology, like in the automotive industry. We have safety standards. These safety standards did not stop or destroy innovation in the automotive industry, but they made it compatible and safe with cars in the street together with pedestrians. So in the same way, in the AI domain, we really are building more and more and recognizing more and more that AI governance is important. And it includes many things. It includes the classification and identification of risk. It includes impact assessment. It includes transparency, very important. It includes human oversight, meaningful human oversight. And so these are not just bureaucracy or hurdles that really are delaying what people want to do with AI, but they are really there to protect our autonomy, our dignity, our rights, and our right to have the freedom to have our own opinion. The governance infrastructure for, of course, has to be a responsibility shared by all the actors, the institutions that define the rules, the legal system, and the corporate environments as well, which is where I have most experience. So also those that design, deploy, and use AI have a big responsibility in understanding what's the right governance, and more increasingly so with the rise of agentic AI systems that can make also actions, take actions in our place. So this freedom of human thought and decisions has to be understood as a requirement when we design AI system, and we should design AI system that supports and pushes us to think, not pushing us to not think and to accept what the AI system says. So this is not really. Sometimes I feel like people say that this is like a tension between human and machines that want to do different things, but actually it's not, because as I said, machines do not have intentions. So it's rather the a tension, if any, between humans and those that build and regulate and build the governance around this system. So there really needs to be a collective responsibility of all the actors in society to create the right governance. Because democracy, again, is made of people that, citizens that can think, they can disagree, they can reach compromises, they can decide by themselves. And therefore, our decision has to be made through an open process, yes, supported possibly by technology, but not persuaded or manipulated by anybody, and especially by technology in an opaque way. So if AI, and it's not an if, AI is going to be part of our future, more and more so it has to be part of our future with that constraint in mind, with that goal in mind, to expand human capability. So we need to remain on top of our decision with the freedom to decide what we want, but again, supported by the technology. So the measure of the success, I don't have solutions here, but I have partial solutions. My research projects are mostly about that, helping humans also to think with our thinking slow rather than just react to what happens around us. But besides my personal way of doing AI research to build systems that help us making decisions, it's really a collective responsibility, and it's not the goal of everybody involved with AI, I think, is not to make systems more and more intelligent, and that's not the goal, but whether we make systems intelligent and wise enough to support our capability of decisions, our freedom, and our growth as person and as society. So I hope that this discussion can help us evolve in that direction. So thank you, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And I think one of the words that really hit me there was the word wise, because I think sometimes we are more intelligent as a society than ever, but we are sometimes not very wise. So I think this is a perfect setting of the stage. And if you didn't understand that previously, I am very excited to introduce our stage setter and keynote, who will give us the kind of starting point for the debate, Professor Marc Hunyadi. He's professor of social, moral, and political philosophy at the Catholic University of Louvain. Marc has spent years examining how technologies shape norms, autonomy, and human agency. He's written numerous books and articles, and he's a real authority in everything that we are going to be discussing here. So we're very excited to have him give us a bit of thought starters that will then be followed up in the panel. He's also the promoter, together with a Paris-based collective, of the idea of a universal declaration for the rights of the human mind, which I think is a fascinating idea and a very much needed idea. So enough from me. Mark, thank you for being here with us, and please take the stage.
Thank you, Erika. Thank you, Gianluca, for inviting me. I'm going to read my speech. We would not be here today if we did not share a common conviction. Digital technologies are transforming our world in deep and lasting ways. They are not simply providing us with tools. They are reshaping how we live, how we relate to one another, and ultimately how we inhabit the world itself. They offer extraordinary possibilities, but they also carry consequences whose full scope we are now only beginning to perceive. Public debate has largely focused on cognitive risks, attention disorders, the erosion of skills, the weakening of autonomous reasoning, misinformation, and the manipulation of attention, to name only few. These dangers are real and serious. Yet they are also the most visible signs of a deeper transformation. Because they are easier to identify and to address through technical, legal, or educational measures, we are tempted to treat these dangers as the central problem. And yet we must resist that temptation. Cognitive risks matter, but they should not define the limits of our reflection. They belong to a broader and more decisive question, one that concerns not only how we think, but how we live. What is at stake here is the very way we live, shaped by the pervasive influence of technology, and it is this deeper shift that deserves our attention. The reason is that these new technologies differ in kind, not merely in degree. They are what I call meta-technologies, technologies of technologies, designed to absorb existing technical systems and to host those still to come. Unlike traditional tools directed toward specific purposes, these meta-technologies operate as open-ended means, capable of serving virtually any end. This is why meta-technologies are able to spread across human life so effectively. Because these meta-technologies are both holistic and indeterminate, they slowly colonize all human activity. Our dependence on them has become an essential dependence. In every sphere of human life, private, social, professional, technology has become the mandatory passage point for the realization of even the simplest goals. To depend on machine means, first and foremost, that we must obey them before we can use them. That is, we must comply with expectations that are not our own. We are required to identify ourselves, create profiles, enter codes and passwords. These are all acts of obedience to what the machine demands of us. Such seemingly minor everyday gestures, therefore, point to a much deeper anthropological fact. We are increasingly placed in a position of having to obey machines, something that is entirely unprecedented in human history. This transformation, however, is not primarily cognitive. It is behavioral. The smart city, for example, often celebrated as the future of urban life, does not chiefly aim to control minds, but to organize and optimize conduct within a hyper-connected environment. Its guiding logic is one of cybernetic optimization, treating human actions as variables to be continuously steered and managed. Such systems may eventually shape how we think, but that is a secondary effect. Their primary function is to guide and optimize behavior through algorithmic environments. What is emerging is a technological ecosystem that has more impact on actions than on ideas, quietly reorganizing the conditions of everyday life. What is at stake in this optimization of everyday life is nothing less than a cybernetic reshaping of the human mind, not just of how we think, but how we act. The mind is not cognition alone. It is the whole range of behaviors through which we engage with the world. To transform it cybernetically is to transform in turn our entire relationship to the world. And this leads to the crucial point. A fully cybernetic way of life, organized around the constant management of data through screens, can remain perfectly compatible with our existing framework of individual rights. We can easily imagine an algorithmically governed world that, on paper, respects freedom while quietly reshaping everyday life. This is the drama of our time. We are undergoing technological upheavals that we are not equipped to govern, morally, legally, or politically. Human rights do not direct these transformations. They follow them, making cosmetic adjustments. As it stands, the law offers no protection against the digital ecosystem itself. Some welcome this evolution as a vast marketing opportunity. Others accept it for the comfort and convenience it promises. For both, the cybernetic future of the mind raises no real concern. But those who seek different paths for humanity lack the means by which to propose one. As mentioned, we are simply not equipped intellectually or institutionally to confront the cybernetic transformation of the human mind or the mode of existence it creates. One might object that existing legislation, particularly in Europe, already provides strong protections. And in a sense, this is true. However, these legal frameworks protect individuals only insofar as they are digital users. It is unthinkable that any of these regulations would protect them from the digital ecosystem itself. On the contrary, the European Union consistently promotes and accelerates the full digitalization of society, text after text, policy after policy. In other words, individual rights are not enough to resist the cybernetic alignment of the human mind. They may even contribute to it, as the European example suggests, through a form of ethical laundering. It is for this reason that I have put forward a proposal for a universal declaration of the rights of the human mind, an indispensable and urgent complement to existing law. Such a declaration would provide the new ethical framework we now lack, one that reasserts human sovereignty over our technological creations, builds long-term trust in the metatechnological ecosystem, and directs innovation toward human ends rather than systemic imperatives or corporate appetites. It is for these reasons that I advocate for such a declaration. Its purpose is clearly not to solve all the problems raised by metatechnologies. but to establish an ethical framework within which those problems must be addressed. In this sense, it is comparable to the Declaration of Human Rights. That text did not resolve the violence humans inflict on one another, but it established a new standard of human dignity, and in doing so, marked a historic turning point. Today, we need a milestone of the same magnitude, one capable of preserving the sovereignty of the human mind. For those who remain skeptical, let me note that this new marker is already taking shape before our eyes. When some countries restrict social media access for children under 15, they are not acting in the name of individual rights, since such measures explicitly limits freedom. Rather, translation, I can say it in French after, if you want. Rather, as a member of the House of Lords recently observed, they do so because constant engagement with social media, especially for children, is simply, quote, bad for humanity. He said that last week, bad for humanity. In agreeing with that judgment, these societies are already moving beyond the mere defense of individual rights. They are seeking to protect the well-being, development, and sovereignty of the human mind. However, this movement lacks a coherent ethical framework. The proposed declaration is intended to supply exactly that foundation. More broadly, any concrete measure, whether in schools, in the protection of the neural and cognitive data, or in demands for transparency and explainability, only has meaning if it refers to a higher ideal. Otherwise, why call for protection or transparency at all? Without a universal framework to articulate that ideal, such efforts are bound to remain fragmented, local, and ultimately ineffective. That higher ideal is the sovereignty of the human mind. A universal declaration of the rights of the human mind would act as an ethical beacon, setting a new course not only for democracy, but for the future of humanity itself, a future in which the sovereignty of the human mind is preserved against its cybernetic becoming. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Marc. Merci, Professor Untitled. And indeed, it was a pleasure, and we insisted a lot for having Professor Untitled with us today. So merci, thanks a lot. And actually, this is great as it bridges exactly with what we were discussing earlier today with the declaration on the sovereignty of the human mind. So very much in line with your thought and approach. Now, if Marc has helped us name the problem and framing it in terms of agency and autonomy, the next step, Francesca already said, it's a governance. And so what can be done within the existing institution? And, as we are in France, everybody watched the President Macron a few weeks ago when went viral with the for sure. They have limitations. Indeed, the existing institutions have limitations. But what can we do to coordinate these institutions across borders and especially across the Atlantic in the current geopolitical situation? And what also Draghi recently reminded us is a new world order. Also the Prime Minister of Canada mentioned that. So we have the pleasure to have here with us Brando Benifei is a member of the European Parliament. He is young, if I may, but is actually one of the oldest members of the parliament, in the sense it has been 3 times already, and he has been across a very important dossier, including the AI Act. He was one of the co-rapporteurs in the previous mandate, and now he's actually also not only keep cheering the AI Act as it is, as he is co-chairing the working group on the implementation and enforcement of the AI Act, but he's also chairing the delegation of the European Parliament for relations with the United States. So you sit exactly at the intersection of what we are discussing today, democracy, regulation, the transatlantic technology diplomacy. So what's happening in Brussels, in Strasbourg, where you just arrived, in New York and Washington? Please give us your perspective. And you can choose, you can stand or whatever. Okay. And thanks to joining us.
So, sorry, I just arrived rolling from Strasbourg, where we had the plenary of the parliament. I was just voting like 1 hour ago, and I arrived. So I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this moment with friends with which I work since already some time, for some time in these years. And I see them also in the audience and with the panel that will follow. I have to say that I think this discussion cannot be separated from what is happening in these hours with our political leaders all closed in a room like it happens periodically to discuss always the same things, usually with little conclusion, but maybe this time can be the right time. Hopefully, I hope so. Because to be honest, I think that sovereignty and European unity is quite intertwined with what we are discussing, at least for the European perspective. I've been so many times in this last year in the United States because of my work as chair of this delegation for the relations with the United States. I meet with very different people, from the administration to the Congress to the think tanks to the civil society. And it's true that there is a strong current that is not only in the administration but in other parts of American society, and is getting traction and targeting our EU legislation that simply uses one very, very simple point to contest the European approach, which is the free speech angle. So I don't need to say which think tank, but there is a very influential think tank in Washington, very close to the administration, that almost organized a trial on me when we had a meeting around the use of AI Act, which I was one of the co-rapporteurs, to constrain the AI models, because the AI Act already foresees the fact that we do not want AI models to be able to easily produce in a massive and easy way pedopornographic material or extremely violent material or instructions to become a terrorist or instructions and incitation on killing yourself or committing self-harm or harm to others. But even these topics are extremely controversial now when I talk with the American interlocutors, because there is an absolutization, in my opinion, of the free speech element. We can say it's ideological, it's linked to business interests. There can be different reasons that we can consider. But it's a fact that there is a difference now. It's not true, as we might think, that there is not a cooperation still ongoing with the other side of the Atlantic on many aspects of AI governance, of AI standards, of AI technical discussions. They are happening, but the front line is sending a different message. And this is influencing negatively, I would say, the cooperation. In fact, next week I will be in India at the India AI Impact Summit, but I was already participating in the Paris Summit 1 year ago. And already 1 year ago, I could see some shift, and I'm sure I will see more shift next week, in the sense that other subjects are emerging in saying we want to lead and build a discourse on AI safety, on building common standards. And I have to say that it would be the worst choice for Europe to now abandon its capacity to be a rule maker and a debate setter. I'm not even saying a rule setter, because it's not true. And to be frank, as a rapporteur of AI Act, I want to be very blunt. Without investment on computational capabilities, on more integrated financial market, and so I connect back to Draghi, to Letta, to what is happening in these hours, I'm not convinced our model of a human-centric AI can win or survive in this global competition. We need hard power on AI in Europe for our model to be functioning. In the next weeks, I will meet, for example, with people from South America, from Canada, from other G7 countries, from Africa, that are working on AI legislation. It's not true that the idea of regulating AI with a certain humanistic approach is like an idea of Europe against everyone else. It's fake. I had a meeting today with South Korean officials about this. It's not true. Even in US, there is a big fight between federal government and governments of the single states around this topic. But all this effort to actually try to govern this incredible transition, which is obviously safety rules, risk management, but also societal questions about democracy, about distribution of added value, fiscal policies, social policies. I mean, it's a very big debate. But to conclude, my point is that the EU has tried to position itself as a rule maker and debate setter on digital rules, not only on AI, but also think of the big discussion around the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. But I think it needs to make a leap in terms of political unity and capability to centralize enforcement, to have stronger institutions to actually apply the rules, because otherwise there is fragmentation, and even from just a business perspective, this is not working, that we keep a fragmented implementation of EU-wide rules. With the work on the omnibuses that we are doing now, we are doing in these days, maybe we can insist on the real simplification, which in my view is more centralized enforcement, less confusion, less fragmentation in the member states, more European-wide approach on how to govern digital and innovation subjects. And so to conclude, I think that only if we are convinced of our capability of being, as Europeans, a part of this global discourse with our specificities, but also trying to build a more developed AI ecosystem, then we can play a constructive role in this context where, unfortunately, another narrative is emerging very strongly, which is the arms race around AI. I don't think this will lead us in very beautiful places, but without an active role of Europe, which is not the Europe of today. We need a different, more politically united Europe. I'm sorry, but I'm convinced of this. This is not a technical issue, it's a political issue. Without this stronger effort, I think we are not going in good directions for the future of humanity. And I think that Europe can play a role in driving the discourse in a better direction. And to do this, we need to talk with everyone, also with the difficult subjects like both for totally different reasons, I would say, but today they are both difficult, both the US and also China. And we need to discuss with everyone, knowing that we can be a reference point for those powers, maybe the so-called middle powers that Carney was talking about, that can still believe in an international rule-based world order, which the big powers don't seem to like very much anymore. Not only the US, also China, also Russia. But I think we should not renounce to that, because a world where we renounce to the international legal order, including on AI issues, it's not a better world, especially for us and for those that do not want to rely on nuclear threat or on a balance of terror for our future. So we are in a crucial moment to see where we are going, and this discourse on AI, on digital sovereignty, on where we go as Europe, I think will be crucial to see where we are going, in fact, not only as Europe, but also as the world. Thank you very much.
So, grazie Brando, thanks a lot for this, very inspiring. So we have seen the research and the policy perspective. So we have, I'm sure everybody has questions, and I have some questions also, but let's now move to the second part of the session. So calling here on stage the other panelists. So we didn't have enough chairs. So we have here already with us Bernard Benamou, that is president of the Institute for Digital Sovereignty. Christian Kastrup, where is Christian? Christian, please join us. That is CEO and president of the Global Solutions Initiative. Emanuela Girardi, president of ADRA, the AI Data and Robotics Association. Gru Hasselbalch, please. Okay, we need one more chair. Sorry, we asked for. So, that is the research director of data ethics and many more things. Paul Nemitz here, that is also acting as an assistant, that is in the circles in Brussels is known as Mr. GDPR, because he's been working for many years in the Commission, exactly at the intersection of justice and digital policy. And last but not least, Simona Tiribelli, who is a professor of AI ethics at the University of Macerata and also director of the Public Innovation Institute at the MIT in Boston. So, okay, we now move into the panel discussion. Okay, actually, okay, I will go, but Erika will be back also in sharing with me the moderation. But I mean, basically, we have listened very carefully to what Professor Hunyadi said about when AI becomes anthropomorphic, it can simulate even intimacy. What would the democratic society insist on so that freedom of thought, autonomy, and civic trust are not eroded further? So we will have three moments here. First, a short opening round from each of you, where you can also elaborate more on your activities. And let's say the prompt, if we want to use, will be very simple. You have 2 minutes to make a kind of introduction on what is the single most urgent safeguard for democracy when persuasion becomes actually conversational, personalized, scalable, and when the relationship itself between the human and the machine that are not, as Francesca said, opposing each other, but actually are now in a strange relationship, becomes actually the medium of the influence between also human beings. And then we will go a bit more, depending on the time, on further deepening the discussion. So please, we can maybe start in order from here, from Emanuela, and get to the panel, please.
Thank you, Gianluca, and good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so what is the most urgent safeguard? So, okay, first of all, I'm the president of ADRA. ADRA is the AI Data and Robotics Association, and is the private partner of the European Commission on the public-private partnership on AI, data, and robotics. And we spent the last 1.5 years working on physical AI, so I think I will go for physical AI probably as a topic. And so the first one, I think that since I'm the first, I have the honor to say it, the biggest safeguard today is definitely education. So maybe I mean, everybody is thinking about it, but I think that it's not so obvious, because especially if I think about the risk that Francesca highlighted, or Professor Martin highlighted, I think that we really need to teach people what is AI, how AI learns, how AI, I mean, the agency of AI. Today we have also, I mean, not only generative AI, but agentic AI and then physical AI. So if we can really teach them what AI is and how it works, people, I think, will learn how to use them in a different way. I mean, even if Francesca shared with us, I don't know if see her, she's still there? No, she left. Okay, she shared with us that even her, I mean, who knows exactly what is AI, she's asking, I mean, AI for, not personal, but for some suggestions, some deep suggestions to help her thinking through a complex problem and to find solution. I think that she knows exactly what is the solution is like. She's able to use that critical thinking that most of the people today, I mean, seems not to have when they use AI. I mean, we have like 1 out of 4 teenagers who use AI as an AI companion, and this is a very big risk because they're also in a kind of fragile moment of their life. They can be very, very much impressioned, and I mean, the suggestion that they receive, they can really influence, persuade them, manipulate their behavior. So I think that this is the first thing. And then if I have a little bit more time, I will say that the second part, so besides education, is like the one that I would call a sort of embodiment transparency. So if we think about the principle of transparency, that it's well included in the AI Act, but now it has to go a little bit deeper into embodiment, into the physical AI. So transparency of agency and also transparency of intent. Because if I think about physical AI, so think about a humanoid, for instance, it's not only that it has to keep on reminding us that we're dealing with a robot, even if it looks like maybe more and more probably in the future like a humanoid, but also, I mean, the intent, why it was built to what to do, I mean, what is the goal of this system? Who built it? This is also important. And all these things, I think this transparency of agency and intent are probably the most, I mean, the most urgent safeguard for the physical AI.
May I jump in? So thanks a lot for the prompt. I'm really aligned actually with what Manuela just outlined. So tenure track assistant professor in Italy at the University of Macerata, director for AI Ethics at Public Innovation Institute, which is a center founded at MIT. Now is a little bit more independent, working with both MIT and Harvard. And we are working a lot on actually designing, like these tools in a way that is serving a little bit more public health and, of course, public goods. So in this sense, I think that, I mean, 2 things. One is a little bit perhaps not enough. So on the one side, I mean, I'm really a fan of the work that we are doing in Europe, of course. But I think that I might say this, that we have to make the policies that we have a little bit more effective. So we have this implementation gap that needs to be filled, of course, sooner than later, especially because we have very interesting policies and regulation, let's say about something about the Digital Service Act, right to explanation. So we need to know how we are profiled, how we are treated by such platforms in order to compensate the asymmetric, let's say epistemic and agency asymmetry that there is between us and these platforms. And on the other side, of course, like AI ethics literacy, that's very important at any level, like designers' point of view that do not know actually how they can prevent, for example, people to be from manipulation. And here we have to make a distinction between, of course, hyper-persuasion and manipulation, but also at the citizen level. So we really need, like today, in this very, let's say, opaque and more AI, governed, let's say, era, some tools in order to be robust, like citizens from an epistemic and ethical point of view. Thank you.
I will try to be brief. That's the worst way to begin a long speech. I'm Bernard Benamou. I'm a General Secretary of the Institute of Digital Sovereignty in Paris. And I've been previously, in my former existence, interministerial delegate for technology in France, and also a diplomat for negotiation at the UN on internet regulation. At this moment, I will quote someone I never quote, and someone I almost opposed to every single thought he had. But on that very single quote, I agree with him. Someone said, the country, the region, the people who will lead the internet revolution will lead the world. The man is Vladimir Putin. And on that, I fully agree with him, first. Second, I will quote someone who is a mass murderer, talking about the Pope. How many divisions? Joseph Stalin. Europe, how many divisions in terms of industry and digital industry and AI? Not enough. I will quote two persons I like and I agree with on most subjects, and especially we are with many Italian ones today. Mario Draghi, who said that if we don't have a surge in financing and political development and political industrial policy about those issues, every regulation, and I'm a former regulator, every single regulation will fall flat. And we need to understand that if we don't have divisions in that field, we will be obliterated, not only economically, but politically. And democracy will be what some want, a footnote in history. We Europeans, created democracy, and it could be a single comma in the history of political systems. Do we want that? No. Can we oppose the current trend of three empires, we discussed that before, attacking simultaneously Europe, meaning China, Russia, and now the US? Do we want that? Do we want that to prevail for us in the future? My answer, as you can guess, is no. And we are talking about how to regulate, how to govern those issues. That's important. But if we don't have industries able to, what we call, develop a third way for Europe, whatever we want to regulate, how many defensive measures we take, will not be enough.
I'm Paul Nemitz. I'm a professor of law at the College of Europe and ex-director in the Commission. I was the lead director on GDPR, bringing that into the law books. So I agree with everything which has been said, and I would add the following. If we want to live free in the future, we have to get rid of the huge profiles which exist in the hands of the big data collectors like Facebook and Google and others, and increasingly also those who produce and roll out AI, because they read us. Every one of us is profiled according to more than 2,000 parameters. Whether you use the internet or not, they get you. Whether you use Google or not, they profile you. And if private companies, which are powerful, or the state, and often the state also has these profiles about you, if these profiles exist in the long run, we cannot have a democracy. Because it means that the powerful corporations and the state know everything about you, but you don't know really what they are doing with it, and you will never know it. We have the tools to get rid of these profiles. We have a good data protection law in Europe, but it is not sufficiently enforced. So my plea is very simple. Let's go for these profiles, and I encourage all of you to ask for deletion of your profiles from the big corporations and to ask the DPAs, the data protection authorities in your countries, to investigate and insist that they help you to get rid of the profiles because they are not necessary, they are unproportional. And if no action is taken, I encourage you to seek others to go with you together to courts and to force the data protection authorities and the companies to get rid of these huge profiles, which in the end rob your freedom. Thank you very much.
Christian?
No, I can wait. Anyway, so it's a bit difficult for me, as after Paul, it's always dangerous and difficult to talk about something. Christian Kastrop, I am the former Federal State Secretary of Germany for Digital Society and Consumer Protection. So, and I had also the honor to coordinate the several ministries in Germany, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance. There was no Ministry of Tech in a way at that time. Now we have something. We have a digital ministry now. And I remember that very well. So what has happened, and of course, I think we have to see what is the digital technology as such, and in what environment it will be, say, be seen or adapted or brought out to the public. And I think this is the problem, because Paul already alluded to that. There's not just a great technology, which can also be something, if we do it in the right way, something very, very for each individual. It's very good, very profitable for each individual and also for society. If there just would not be, and this is still what also Paul alluded to, when there are interferences, of course, with, say, governmental interest. So I may say the EU regulation, we just heard about it, and I always was a bit part of the EU discussion, especially on the AI Act, and of course, and also on the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act. And of course, there were some, say, countries in the Union who would say, we do it a little bit more liberal than others. I do not, probably some of you know which country I mean. There are more, so there's also then industry, of course, has a very heavy influence in all that area and says, so I think we have heavy competition from outside Europe, give us a bit more leeway. I once had the honor to be part of Angela Merkel's Council on Digital. And there was industry speaking up, 14 minutes, 15 minutes they got, and they only said, don't be now too upfront with any regulation. Let us do it. And if there is a problem, we go for that later. And then I remember even as a federal state secretary, I could not speak up so openly. But then, the representative of, or the office of Angela Merkel's, the boss of Angela Merkel's office said, hey, come on, this is really now a little bit tough. So I think in the best of all worlds, we can do that. There could be a match. But of course, on a global level, now leaving Germany here for a second, I really have also the impression, and you also alluded to that, so that's really great what you said, I think there is the issue that some countries want facilitated for, say, a political, economically, and maybe also for personal interest. And this is, I guess, a very, very great danger. So if we have people who want to fiddle around with these digital technologies, making them not for the general public, make it not for the betterment of individual people, but use it for their own purposes, then we enter in very heavy times. And as already said, we have seen that in the East, we have seen that in the West. And let me leave it again with Mark Carney. He has said some very good things, and I think we should all follow that route.
Thank you. So now I'm getting, after this row of fantastic points, so safeguards against persuasion. So I'm Gry Hasselbalg. I'm the co-founder of a think tank called Data Ethics EU. We were founded in 2015, so that's many years ago. Basically based on the idea that there was something moving in the wrong direction in terms of, at that time, it was data, digital technologies, socio-technical infrastructures of power that we felt were moving in the wrong direction in terms of both our human powers, but also in particular the European approach. No? I've also written a few books. My last book is called Human Power, 7 Traits for the Politics of the AI Machine Age. And getting to that point, I think that the biggest safeguard that I wanted to put forward right now when I was thinking how to answer this question was, one of these things is human collective action, of course. Instead of looking at how can we solve these problems with technological solutions, let's move back and think about what is it that human power has been able to do through history. So human collective action, for example, in the industrial age, we had trade unions moving forward, getting together in terms of creating properly and collective action, proper ways of dealing with human life in an age where technological developments were speeding up and changing social organization and so on and so forth. So right now, one of the biggest powers we have, this human collective action, is actually also one of the forces that I think is most challenged by these persuasive technologies. So think about how, now we get ideas from these technologies. We're the generative AI, we're sitting and having a conversation. This conversation we used to have with ourselves. This was the critical thinking. We were sitting by ourselves, using our human power to have these conversations with ourselves. Think about, for example, now the immense amount of human interaction that is basically mediated by ChatGPT, for example. It's very difficult to get into a debate or a conversation without having someone. I had the other day a panel debate I had to participate in, and everyone told me, oh, I just checked with ChatGPT what I should be saying in this debate. So I think that what we need to defend now is really this human collective action, and the only way we can do that is both by law. There's several laws that has been mentioned here, and legal frameworks and the human-centric approach and these things. This is really important. This is on a macro level. But also, when I look at, for example, educational institutions, every single educational institution really needs to have a very strong policy regarding the use of generative AI. We should have policies regarding the use of generative AI for example, preparing a panel debate, because we need to protect it. This is the foundation of democracy, is the human collective action, the critical thinking of one person, and the interaction, the conversations we have with others. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting points, but let me try to go back to the key issue of that Professor Hunyadi mentioned about the sovereignty of mind, of the human mind, because so this is where we see the biggest challenge and threat for democracy, as also Francesca in her opening speech said. So let me go to Brando, that is, every day on the on the forefront of this. So if conversational AI can actually persuade at scale, what is the biggest governance gap you see today? Is just transparency, accountability, or actually enforcement capacity? And what could be the concrete measure that actually should be prioritized in the next 12 months? Easy question.
Well, it's a bit of everything, but maybe if you ask me about prioritizing, I need to take my hat as chair of the implementation of the AI Act, and so naturally, although we are working with the omnibus on modifications, so as I said, we will push, I'm sure, many of us from the parliament to obtain more power for the AI office to actually centralize more enforcement. But this is part of the revision that we are discussing. On the implementation of what is already there, sorry, but clearly is the transparency, because we have put quite advanced transparency provisions that need to be operationalized, not in a very light or even fake way, because one thing is the letter of the law, one thing is how you implement it through various implementation acts. Now we are talking, for example, I had a session, we had 3 hours discussion with the European Commission on the code of transparency. So the way how we implement the transparency provisions, it's now under production. There was a consultation now. And I mean, just to mention 2 things, the making AI generated content recognizable as such, as AI generated, and the very complex copyright protection topic even just these two elements. To be very frank, these are the two main elements of private lobbying I've got during all the work on AI Act, because the states, the governments have concentrated on prohibitions, law enforcement. They wanted less limits on biometric cameras, predictive policing, all the things that in fact we limit with the AI Act. But from the private side, it was mostly about the transparency, because it means giving the downstream provider more information from the few big players, but also the operationalization of these copyright provisions, which are already there. It's just applying the existing rules. The AI Act doesn't change anything, but simply we are not able to apply them today if we don't do certain things. And the recognizability of AI-generated content. This is extremely important today with the explosion of the deepfakes through the use also of generational and conversational AI, which is now becoming less and less distinguishable from reality. And without instruments, obviously, of education, I completely agree with what was said earlier by Emanuela, that sometimes we forget that we need this very important work on all this side. But we also need some technical guarantees that can prevent the lack of distinguishability of reality and fake. We are already there, so we are already late on that. So we need to concentrate on this. So I mentioned this because I fear the fact that with everything moving, what we obtained quite firm, quite clear, if it's not implemented correctly, it becomes useless.
Thanks. So, Emanuela, as Brando called you in, so I mean, you in ADRA, you actually sit at the intersection of AI and robotics. And one of the main issues now is when AI is embodied in an anthropomorphic social robots. So what are the new risks that actually are emerging comparing to, the simple chatbots that we have today?
So there are really lots of new risks, because we were used, until like 1 year ago, more or less, to AI that was just responding to our prompt, like you mentioned. And then AI started acting with agentic AI, and now AI starts moving with physical AI, so the convergence between AI and robotics. So this brings us into a completely different dimension, and there are really lots of new risks. Think, how, for instance, how a physical AI system learns. So LLM, they learn, through languages, with all the data of the languages. But physical AI, they learn in word model, so it's a simulation of reality. So they learn like all these systems, they are ethics by design, safe by design, responsible by design, and so on. But then they move from the sim to real, some sims to reality world, and there is the one that they call a sort of reality gap. So basically they have to face what was not foreseen, the unpredictability of the real world. And this is something they're not ready for because they haven't learned it. And so we have the one that they call it the so-called emerging behaviors. So some behaviors of the system that nobody has foreseen, and so we don't know how to deal with them. We saw, for instance, last week there was this, it was on the news, the social media for agents. Malt book, you probably all saw it, and you all saw all the comments and so on. So we saw these agents that they were just interacting with themselves. And then we, human people, we gave some sort of meaning to the way they were interacting. But the system, they were just optimized. So they were doing some sort of optimization. So we just gave additional meaning, to what they were doing. But in reality, this was not happening. But if we think about an ecosystem of agents, and then we move to physical AI, think about not the single robot doing, social care or working in a factory, but an ecosystem of autonomous system. So really, autonomous robots. living, within, among us, this could be very risky, because if we think about a failure, it's not only a software failure. A failure for a physical system can really cause also physical damage, physical harm to people. So this is something, the safety and security as well, but mainly the safety is a risk that has a completely different dimension when it comes to a robot, living and interacting with human being on real time, that it's able to adapt in real time. So I think this is one of the biggest things. The other thing, if I can have 30 more seconds to mention it, is that when we are interacting with an LLM, so with the generative AI, there are lots of risks. Persuasion, manipulation are some of the risks. But if we think about communication, the language is just a small percentage of communication. Maybe it's 5–10%. The rest of the communication is really like the body language. So if we think about a robot that can really, it's sharing the same physical space that I'm sharing, is looking at the eye in each other's eyes, is touching me like this. The relationship that a human being can build with the robot, it's much deeper. The trust, it's much deeper if we think now about, for instance, the AI companion. So the risk of persuasion is much higher, because through the sensor, the robot can really understand, for instance, how I'm complying to the suggestion that is making. And so, if there is a sort of manipulation or persuasion by design in the algorithm, this can go much, much deeper in the behavior. So this is, I think, probably one of the biggest risks. I don't know how to solve it, because there isn't yet a governance of physical AI. We are starting to work on it, but I think that this is really like, understanding how the interaction is, the frequency of interaction, how often I'm following the suggestion that the system is suggesting me. So this is also, very deep, and we need to take care of this.
Thank you. Well, maybe Simone has some suggestion, because here we are at the World. We are at the World AI Cannes Festival, so here, builders of technology, investors, public institutions comes together. So is there any practical mechanism that we could actually make the ecosystem adopt? So maybe, I don't know, evaluation protocols, specific procurement requirements, voluntary code of ethics. So please.
So thanks a lot. So I think that, as we know, voluntary code of ethics are great, but perhaps not any more effective, unfortunately. We saw that actually companies very often use them like just for ethics washing. So I think that we have to go a little bit more, hard in that sense. Of course, like procurement and government here, as we said before, play a fundamental role. As for enforcement, as we know, as we have already, many interesting and meaningful policies that have been mentioned before, that, for example, help us to prevent extreme profiling. Profiling per se is not the worst thing ever. The problem is when it comes to, psychological, specifically profiling, especially intimate profiling, and the use of the inference that this profiling can actually disclose of people, their sensitive traits, their vulnerabilities, use them actually to not just nudge, but to push them, and so to manipulate them towards certain third-party oriented goals that do not overlap with the goals of the individual, very often the well-being of the individual. So actually we can do so much, and let me say that, working in the space of specifically AI ethics and governance, AI ethics specifically, I work with many companies that are truly interested to do something good. Very often they ask me about, how can I do this? Because I want to do it. I want to do responsible innovation. And we have already the tools, especially when it comes to, let's say, involving and bridging, a little bit better the discourse with industry. We have the ethics by design requirements and protocols that we can put in place. For example, for transparency, we have actually today many measures for, ensuring that these tools are actually intelligible and recognizable by citizens in that sense. We have tools, for example, to make audit possible for third-party independent, for example, centers. This is extremely important, especially when it comes to harm assessment, harm prevention. So we know that the majority of the harms that they produce are now real. We know them, actually, and this can be now foreseeable and can be prevented by design or by like a very responsible assessment of their use and implementation. So when it comes to bias, for example, about dataset training, fine-tuning, we have so much information. So, I mean, we just need to use it appropriately and to make it actually real now.
Thanks a lot. So, I mean, we have been talking a lot about let's say, the cognitive sovereignty somehow. So the digital sovereignty is the other, let's say, face of the medal. So how can we actually address this issue, especially in the current situation, especially if this anthropomorphic AI actually becomes the default interface of information and services, and most of these services come from one side of the Atlantic?
Many of us could try to answer to that, but basically, we have the scientists. Since you're talking about world model or physical AI, one of the best came back from the US, Yann LeCun, and we know that it's the next wave. I'm not the expert here. There are much more experts here, but we know that we can develop that. Again, it's a matter of political will. What lacked in Europe those last year was the will to compete and the will to consider it as strategic. Earlier we talked about the fact that those issues in terms of political discussions, political conviction, manipulations, they are happening now, but we saw that coming a long time ago. We saw that coming with social networks. We saw that coming at the very beginning of the era of the AI LLMs, because AI is multi-decades old. So we know now that experts in the field say that it's difficult to be sure that we can align the alignment problem, like Brian Christian has been writing about. It's difficult. It's not impossible. We have to work on it. But what we are sure about is that if we let Chinese models trained by Chinese on Chinese data, but also on European data as well, they steal it a lot of data to train their models. But also, as Grok has been showing so obviously with Elon Musk AI, if we rely only on American models, except maybe Claude. I was impressed how Claude Amodia was opposing Trump on that. But he's an exception. So basically, if we don't do that ourselves with our sets of values, this will never happen. And we know now it's about politics, it's about social development, and a lot of other fields. So, and soon it could be on the very definition of human mind, with transhumanism, with all the toxic ideology of changing the core DNA in many ways of humans to adapt to technologies. Because we made a report that I advertise here on AI and democracy on the website of the Institute of Digital Sovereignty in France. You can find it easily. And we discussed those evolution of ideology and philosophy. Those are toxic philosophy. If we don't mind the human becoming inhuman in the future, and that's precisely what Musk's and a few others, I will not give names, but a few other philosophers are toxic. Look at Peter Thiel, who's not a philosopher, but who has been, he tries to, if you can say that. Those are toxic views of humans being unable, being unworthy of the future. And if we are tired of ourselves, if we consider that humans are something to be stepped over, and to one ladder on the evolution, one step on the evolution ladder, yeah, if we consider that we have to abandon all hope of mastering the future, of designing the future, then, okay, that's the key to Musk, Thiel, and a few others, and let's pretend that Europe experience is not important, that it was just again, a footnote in history.
Merci, Bernard. So, Paul, you were very clear before on the data issue. So, but now we are, there is this saying now that no data, no party. So, no data, no AI. So now we are a step further with all these conversational AI systems. So, what is missing there? So, in terms of making sure that we don't exceed in persuasion, etc.
Yes, I would like to say one thing to Brando. If the ambition now is to have stronger enforcement, then you have to allocate individual rights in the AI Act to individuals to bring cases and to insist that the authorities which must enforce the AI Act, like the Commission, must act on a complaint. It's not enough, as the AI Act says, that a complaint of an individual will be taken into account. But there must be a way for citizens and civil society, like in GDPR, to take the Commission to court if it doesn't act, and also to take the national authorities to court. In this age of power imbalance between individuals and these huge corporates and the state, you always need three ways of enforcement in cumulation and parallel. First, public enforcement. Okay, that's the Commission and the national enforcers. Second, a right of individuals to seek the enforcement of the AI Act before a court, or to choose to bring a case against a national authority or the Commission to force them to enforce. And third, enforcement by NGOs. And this is really missing in the AI Act right now. People cannot enforce the AI Act. We are completely dependent on what the European Commission is going to do in the future. And if the majorities are bad, and people like Reagan in America, he said, we will not enforce competition law. If a commission president in the future decides, well, we're not going to enforce it, that's it. So this is also what I would like to say to Mark Hyundi. It's good what he proposes, but it is not good to talk down individual rights. It is true that individual rights alone don't protect us completely. But our problem today is that we have great individual rights on paper in forms of values, European Fundamental Rights Charter, but the key question is, how can individuals get these rights delivered? And there we have to have courts play a role, and people must have the possibility to go to court and fight for their rights. And this is a job of the parliamentarians to foresee these ways to courts in the legislation. It is not enough to strengthen the Commission office because, if they... I've been a civil servant myself. I can say this without any way of getting read. The natural inclination of the civil servant is to do nothing. And therefore, it is important that the civil servants know that they have a litigation risk, namely, they will be taken to court. When they take a tough decision against big tech, they will always be taken to court, but they must know if they don't act, and if they don't take a decision towards a big tech, they will also be taken to court. The litigation risk must be on both sides. If it's only on one side, and that's now the situation under the AI Act, that's not good enough. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we will split since Bernard is asking for...
A very brief comment. At this very moment, I fully agree with Paul that I respect deeply for his combat on personal and data privacy. But the problem for me is more political, because at this moment, the US is clearly acting, lobbying, pushing, threatening for those regulations never to be implemented. And not only AI Act, but DSA, DMA, even a GDPR. So basically the question is, will we have political will and leaders to protect those regulations and implement them, or will they fold in front of our friend in the US? That's the real question. And the democratic question for the time being is that, are we folding? Are we capitulating? Like Kamala Harris said, I have foreseen all, but not that the elite will capitulate so quickly in the US. And she, in a way, she was right. So for me, at this moment, it's beyond regulation. It's about politics in its strictest sense.
But then if we move to Christian, I mean, then there is also the economic aspect of this. So then what could be the incentive for the industry to you know, for instance, to avoid a system that have persuasion by design, or you know, specific revenues based on engagement, and so also this competitive pressure to develop anthropomorphic systems.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a global issue indeed. It's a European issue, but it's even a global issue. And how to set, say, new standards for, say, industrial behavior and also for government practice. And as I'm working for a North-South, say, think tank and organization, I would think it could be an option, and this is especially also for Europe again, maybe to create a way for, say, really coalitions of the willing who would accept, say, our mindset on the digital rights of individual people. And I think there is a lot, right now, this is probably what Trump has completely overlooked. Yeah, that he thinks, I can do it here. I'm anyway the global boss. I do what I want. And it will work. In the end, they will all come to me and kiss my something. And yeah, sorry, I didn't say it. Yeah, but I think this is really to check. Yeah, there will always be, like we have always tax havens. We will never get all the tax havens, but there will also, we should avoid to make the so digital havens, which then from industry probably will applaud in that country because they can do things there which they can never do in the European Union because it's forbidden or we simply shouldn't do it. Yeah, so I think, and what we now, I come back to my Carney thing, yeah, I think we have an entire chance for the European Union to come together with this line of, yeah, Canada, Europe, and there are others even in the global south. I think we could give them an option to be part of a coalition of the willing, and it can be, of course, there are two interest issues. Yeah, it can be like-minded, that's easy, but it could also be interest-oriented or interest-minded. And I think this is where probably we can also come to some countries, or a lot of countries, quite some of them after this all these years. I think there is an issue where we can frame a coalition of the willing in the way, it will not be just Brussels then, but we can do something to get together and try to get or to isolate those powers in the globe which are simply on a complete other track. They do not want to cooperation, they want to have power, and the final issue will be that they have to go to war with each other. I don't know what that brings us all about, but I think Europe should really use his full force, and let's at least align on the European level, which is difficult enough. I know it also from my times. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last word for the panel before the closing is to Gru, and I mean, again, let's move from this, let's say, geopolitical, global, macroeconomic view to the more micro of the humans and the minds of humans. So, and you, in your books, have talked a lot about the relation between power and ethics and data, but now with this, exactly, with this persuasive mechanism that are enabled by AI, what is changing in the relations also between humans, machine, and humans?
So I've actually decided to answer the question a little bit differently because based on what everyone is talking about now and everything, I was like, I remember a few years ago when we were talking about AI as a form of innovation that was helping us tackling some of the problems in terms of in medical science, for environmental issues, things like that, like AI for science. Now, at every single debate I'm in, I have to discuss, for example, the anthropomorphic AI technologies, a humanoid future. This is just an inch of the kind of innovation that AI presents. And so I'm thinking more in terms of if we want to talk about power, and who has the power to define the conversations that we have and the laws that we have to make, then I think it's really important to say, how can we in Europe talk about different kinds of innovation? So how about talking about a non-anthropomorphic AI future, or a kind of personalized AI future, but more like a future where we talk about alternative socio-technical infrastructures of human power, for example. So that's why I get to the point of human power. So maybe the thing that we really want to do is to, because also even when we're talking about creating legal frameworks, we're still forced to tackle all of these kind of technologies that have been, like, for example, generative AI technologies could be built in different ways with different kinds of interfaces that are not persuasive and manipulative of human beings. But because they are like that, and they were thrown into the public spheres without any preparation, we now have to deal with it and spend a lot of time and resources on it in creating legal frameworks around them, rather than actually building, as Paul said, on the kind of the best frameworks that we had were fundamental rights, but generally we're talking about human rights, no? It's not just, we already have those kind of legal frameworks, no? So it's just, my point about power is to redefine maybe what we're spending our time on and how creative we are with artificial intelligence. Getting back to a couple of years ago when we were more creative, so.
Thanks a lot. So, I think, this is, as Francesca Rossi remembered, is the second, let's say, part of the session that started already last year, but we have also a number of events across the year in different places, but I'm sure we will be back next year here in Cannes. So, but for the time being, I think we can thank again our panelists, and we move to the closing. So thanks a lot again for your insights. So let me call on stage Stefano Quintarelli, and maybe also Erika can join us. But Stefano is also his fault we are here, because he was insisting a lot for making sure that we have this discussion together with Marco Landi and other colleagues, Giovanni Baldassari, of the idea that bringing this topic here in Cannes in the heart of the, let's say, innovation ecosystem. And actually, also, let me mention and thank those that made this possible. For sure, Copernicani and Rialto Ventures, but also Supernova, that is an Italian venture builder that is actually 10 years old, because this is also part of the issue that we have not discussed here, but how we make sure that we have that digital infrastructure to compete with the American, the Chinese, etc. So we have, everybody is talking here in France about Mistral, for instance, but also we have in other countries emerging realities, like this company Supernova, and that developed a large language model called the Lowry, that helps actually companies to automate processes, orchestrate intelligent agents, and deliver high-quality customer experiences at scale. So clearly, this is the digital infrastructure that was mentioned before. We need to ensure that this is possible and ethically and responsible built. So thanks again to our supporters, and next year will be more, and we will have, I'm sure, an even bigger event. So let me now give the floor to Stefano, that will give us his closing remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Gianluca, and thank you all for being here and for having resisted until now. It's so we are almost over. Indeed, a great panel. Indeed, a great panel. Thank you very much to all the speakers who came here, and wonderful. Next year is going to be better, but it's even better, and we are going to have more time, more panels. Where is Giovanni? Is Giovanni here? Okay. We are going to have more sessions. So there are so many things that I would like to say. Let me start by this. There has been a survey recently that said that 90% of the persons want to have a strong regulation for safety and security for AI. Where is Brando? Here. Okay, Brando. And this survey is in the US by Gallup 2 months ago. So 97%, as you correctly reminded, there is a tension between the federal administration and the states. Actually, in California, they are making a lot of regulations in pretty much similar to things that were done here in Europe. So there is a demand by the people to have rights and rights enforced. But this does not reflect in the policy of the current administration, probably because the people in Washington belong to the other 3% of the Americans. So, of course, the purpose, the objective function of companies is not the well-being of persons, of the society. The objective of the companies is to make money and to give money back to shareholders. I remember I founded a company in Italy in 1994. It was the first Italian unicorn. And we provided internet services and infrastructure to large corporates. And I had a customer that I will not name in Bologna that makes equipment for tobacco companies. You put in one side paper, plastic, and tobacco, and on the other side you have the tobaccos, the packages of cigarettes. Very nice company, very high automation, wonderful stuff. And at those times, we didn't have the mobile phones to play games while waiting for meetings. So you have magazines on the waiting rooms, etc. And that company magazines were full of magazine and articles of doctors that explained that smoking was good for health. Okay. Now, social media is having their tobacco moment, where people recognize that they are causing bad things for the young people, for the young persons, for the society at large. And of course, they fight not to be regulated because their objective is not to do good things for society. You probably have read a couple of weeks ago of that Zuckerberg personally opposed the introduction of limits for the kids when discussing the fact that children chatting with chatbots could be exposed to sexual dialogues. And he decided not to introduce safeguards, regardless their team suggested them to do it. So, but I mean, if we cannot expect companies to have a social-minded, oriented behavior, because that's not their purpose. We need to have regulation. And as Simona was arguing before, regulation can be also fine regulation, fine-grained regulation. We have, Francesca said, talk about the regulation in the auto industry. She said, we have a lot of regulations, and that did not stop innovation. I had a slide with a Fiat 125, 125. It's an old model of Fiat. And I went to the European website and looked for how many regulations are there in the auto production business. And there, between norms, regulations, directives, etc., there are 100, at the time when I checked, there were 125 such regulations. And very fine-grained regulation on safety belts, etc. Perhaps we need to go more into the detail. We know how to make things that are not causing addiction, that are not causing anxiety to people. So we perhaps should go also on that direction. As a matter of fact, China is doing that. I was really... It was stunning for me. It was stunning when I read an article and then I went to check, of course, that in China there are 5 million girls that have a friend who is a chatbot. 5 million kids that have a chatbot as a friend. And they chat, they have a relationship with these chatbots. According to OpenAI own statistics, building a relationship is the second most intense activity by people, the first one being search and the second one being building a relationship. So these girls, 5 million girls have this type of dialogues with their chatbots. And they can even buy letters written by their virtual friends. So I guess there is somebody in Mongolia writing the letters and sending the letter to these girls. And if these girls want to go to the movies with one of the companions, there are actors playing like the chatbot. So you can, I don't remember the correct term, okay, that there are actors acting to pretend to be, to interpreting the chatbot, the entity with which the girls interact. And on January 26th of this year, there was it was the expiration date of a request for comment that was actually an international request for comment on a regulation of anthropomorphic services in China. And I answered to that regulation. I don't know why now my blog is full of Chinese visitors, so I suspect that somebody read what it. But that's an example of fine-grained regulation, and it details all things that companies that make anthropomorphic services need to obey to and report, etc. I mean, the EI Act is really nothing compared to the regulation they are making there. It's really, they're very, very much stronger. Now, if we look at the development of AI, we can see that there are two major business models that are emerging. The one in the US that is favoring the fact of having big companies that create huge data centers and they are vertically integrated, making their the foundation models up to the provision of the service of the chatbot, while in China, they decided to have open weights models developed by companies somehow subsidized by states or somehow tied to the state, and then provide these weights, these models open weight for the whole industries to use them. Again, I'm old, so in the mid-90s, I was one of the first distributors of Netscape in Europe. Remember Netscape, the browser by Andreessen? And at a certain point, he decided to give away the browser for free, while all companies were selling that. And I wrote and I said, well, I distribute that if I give it away for free, how I'm gonna make the money? He said, you're going to make the money out of the server. Fact is that the server competed, they were selling the Netscape server, publishing server for $1 million a license, $1 million at that time. And they didn't sell any, of course, because there were open source competing alternative, Apache and sort. The fact is when you devalue an input, what benefits is all the things that depend on that input. So it's perfectly coherent with the strategy of China to be the workshop, the manufacturing workshop of the world, to have the AI as an input to the production, etc., to the lowest possible cost, and so to have it open source. On the other hand, if the cost of inference goes down enough, and thanks to the advancement in chips and in algorithms, it's going down significantly, very soon, if not today, inference can be subsidized by advertisement. And so the dominant model of the internet that we have had in the Western societies is as a media subsidized by advertising. And the dual of that is that people need to get tracked in order to be able to sell the persons to advertise. So if that model, chatbot as a media, is what I think will be the strategy that these companies are going to follow in the US, and the reason why they are investing in vertical integration in the provision of the service. You see, there are these two competing visions. So AI as a media, chatbots as a media, that requires to be that justifies the fact of being vertically integrated as long as it can be subsidized by advertising, and the other one, AI as an input to manufacturing. And where does Europe stand? And these are coherent. So the vision in China is coherent with the China as a workshop of the world, and the vision in the US is coherent with the fact of being the cultural hegemonists of the world. But the very beginning of social media, I remember I was very happy and I was preaching the people to join social media. Now you should go, and because it's wonderful, you can stay in touch with the people you care, discover other persons that are look-alike like you, that think like you do, etc. And now we have seen that has evolved from being a tool to help people socialize to being a tool of manipulation. And there was a recent figure, you probably have seen, that 7%, just 7% of posts on Instagram are by someone's friend. The rest is content by others that are pushed to it's media that are pushed to the users. And now we recognize that social media is no longer social, it's a media, and it is being used highly focused, highly targeted, in a highly targeted way to influence persons. Now, imagine when this happens with chatbots, where people develop a relation with these chatbots. And who said that it takes 6 months to Erika, perhaps, was you saying that it takes 6 months to completely change one person's mind. Well, imagine the power that you have. Imagine if you have 2 companies, not one because of antitrust reasons, but 2 companies that are providing chatbots as friends as a service to 1 billion people. It makes perfect sense to push your strategic efforts towards developing this kind of scenario. And where does Europe stand in between these 2 forces? Well, it was reminded before, we are the place of the rights, of the democracy, and if we don't want to be just a comma in the history, we need to defend our values. And defending our values now means defending our freedom to create our own thoughts. In many constitutions around Europe, there is not a clear reference to the freedom of thought. In the Declaration of Human Rights at the Article 18, there is a reference to the freedom of thought. But we are here even before of the freedom of thought. It's the freedom of determining your own thoughts. What we are calling now the sovereignty of mind. This moment, I think, it's the tensions that there are in the world are perhaps, there are some fractures, and perhaps they are a good moment to plant a seed for this type of discussions. And we hope that this type of reflections that we're making here today will resonate and propagate elsewhere, and probably hopefully make it into some policies in the future. Thank you very much for being here.